Amnesty International South Africa says almost 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating effect on human rights, especially social, economic and cultural rights. Hospitals, schools, communities and businesses have all taken strain, with over 90,000 lives now lost to the virus in South Africa and 5.3 million globally. My next guest says until pharmaceutical companies stop putting profit before life, developing countries, including those in Africa, will continue to bear the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic. For more on this, then, we're joined by Amnesty International's Global Issues Program Director, Mark Dummett. Mark, a very good evening to you. Welcome to the program. So how has the discovery of the Omicron variant in particular and subsequent global actions further highlighted or exposed the injustices of the pandemic?
Thanks for asking me onto your show and asking this very important question. Of course, this is a global crisis and it requires a global solution. But what you've seen from the main Western pharmaceutical companies that are producing these vaccines is a strategy that's focused on prioritizing profits and distributions to wealthy countries, the US, the EU and others. And this has meant that the supply of vaccines to the rest of the world has been insufficient, allowing for this variant and other variants to appear. And this has just absolutely exposed the inequality, but also the short-sightedness of this approach. And the failure, too, of the governments of the countries where these vaccines were developed, so that's the US, where Pfizer and Moderna are based, but also Germany, where BioNTech, the partner of Pfizer, is headquartered. And essentially what these governments did was, whilst supporting the development of these vaccines, they then left it to these companies to decide on how to distribute the vaccines themselves. They've outsourced the decision to these companies, which have basically chased profits.
Mm-hmm. And whenever this criticism comes up, Mark, the response from countries like the UK is that, yes, they are taking up more vaccine doses, for example, now to give a third shot, booster shots to their populations, but they say they can do that because they've also been charitable, shall we say, or globally responsible, because they've donated also millions of doses to developing nations. Does that hold with you?
I mean, they do say that, but it's just not the case. So only about 1% of doses have been distributed to low-income countries, many of which are in sub-Saharan Africa. That's a horrifically low rate of vaccination, and this comes down to those countries such as the UK, where I'm speaking from, which is hoarded doses. I mean, we have enough doses for boosters and to donate many more to COVAX and to low and lower middle income countries. But also the failure of these pharma companies, as I said, to fairly distribute these to the whole world, and in choosing to follow this path of selling primarily to wealthier countries, they are contributing towards, as you said at the beginning, a human rights crisis. This isn't just a health crisis, but a crisis that's affecting the economy, as we heard in your program earlier, that's affecting education, that's affecting all kinds of different social and economic issues.
And for the pharmaceutical companies, which I think you referenced this as well, a lot of them had funding from the governments where they're based when the process to search for these vaccines began. They say, well, yes, they're dealing with orders that would have come in there, a prioritization of those domestic populations, but they also say in their defense that they're working as fast as possible to meet demand. Are they really?
Well, to answer the first part of the question first, I mean, it's a great example is Moderna, which is one of the two companies which is producing this new mRNA technology vaccine. They were only able to develop this vaccine with the help of US government scientists and with a huge amount of US government aid. But since then, it's been the worst company in terms of fair distribution of vaccines. They really have just prioritized wealthy countries. And what's been so shocking is that in the days after the Omicron variant was reported by South African scientists to the World Health Organization, the share price of Moderna rocketed by over a third and the chief executive officer cashed out some of his shares and made himself a profit of over $3 million US dollars in the days after this variant, had been declared. It's terrible news for the whole world, but really good news for this company and its shareholders. And of course, we're not against companies making profits. We're not against, people getting their due for the hard work and the extraordinary innovations that have gone into creating these vaccines. But the fact remains that this is, a deeply unfair situation. Mm-hmm. At the same time, and in contrast, you have AstraZeneca, which has tried to supply its doses at no profit through COVAX to the world, and their share price over the same period actually went down.
So how then do we avoid profit prioritization over a global health emergency, given that the companies who produce these vaccines have for decades been built for profit?
Well, we need to examine the whole global pharma industry, that's for sure, and this whole model. But immediately, what do we need to do is we need governments which are holding on to these huge stocks, these stockpiles of vaccines, to donate them as soon as possible. Don't just donate the ones that are nearing the end of their date or their use-by dates, but to donate them now. And we need these pharma companies to start donating or distributing at least half of their production to COVAX, which is this body which can then distribute it fairly around the world. We've calculated that if countries do donate their stockpiles, and if the vaccine companies are able to start distributing 50% of their production, then more than 2.5 billion extra people will be vaccinated by the end of the year. And this is what we really need to see, to get to, if we're to emerge from this crisis.
Let's talk then about the TRIPS waiver. Based on what you said, the TRIPS waiver, the idea is that South Africa and India have been leading the push for a lifting of patent restrictions that would allow for countries such as South Africa and India perhaps to jump in and manufacture vaccine doses by the millions. So far, it's been met with resistance. Do you think it'll ever see the light of day, given what's at stake for these companies financially?
Well, I don't think the campaign to lift these patent protections is going to end anytime soon. And this crisis isn't going to go away. And as long as we're in this crisis, Amnesty International and partner organizations around the world and activists around the world and governments led by South Africa and India are going to keep on pushing for it. And what we hear back from the companies and their supporters in some governments is, it won't make a difference to this year. It won't make a difference to next year. And that's absolutely right. I mean, it may not. If we were to lift the waiver immediately, would it make a difference in 6 months' time? Probably not. But that is no excuse for not doing it as soon as possible. This is essential if we're to increase global production of vaccines. And, the sooner the better, and we're going to keep the pressure up.
Mark, good to speak to you. That was Director at Amnesty International's Global Issues Program, Mark Dummett, speaking to us from the United Kingdom tonight. Grateful for your time.